Welcome to Interpreting Your Bylaws for Units and Councils. My name is Pat Acetato, and I am the New York State PTA Bylaws Coordinator. What are bylaws and why do we need them? Bylaws are designed to help you function in an orderly manner. Your bylaws include all the rules that are considered so important that they cannot be changed without previous notice, and they cannot be suspended. Every member of your board should have a copy of your bylaws, and they should be familiar with them. Your bylaws must be updated at least once every 3 years for a unit or a council to remain in good standing. Up-to-date bylaws are required as per your IRS 501c3 regulations. So how do we understand what it all means? Well, this is what this workshop is all about. Before starting, I will note that we are viewing and discussing the unit bylaws first. Council bylaws have many of the same provisions, but there are differences, and I will be noting these along the way and reviewing articles or clauses specific to council bylaws at the end of the unit review. The first difference you will note in council bylaws is that the member units of the council are listed at the very beginning. So you'll see these symbols throughout your bylaws. What do they mean? These symbols indicate required sections that cannot be changed or amended by your local unit. The hashtag indicates compliance with New York State PTA bylaws, and the star indicates compliance with national PTA bylaws. So we start with Article 1, name. The name of the PTA must be exactly as shown in this article of the bylaws. Should the name of the unit or council be changed for any reason, such as renaming of a school, redistricting by the school district, changing the makeup of the building, such as elementary to primary, you need to contact your region director. They will follow the process for this name change and notify the IRS and New York State PTA accordingly. Article 2, Articles of Association. Article 2 states the documents under which the PTA is incorporated under New York State PTA. Article 3, Purposes. The purposes of the association explain the reasons and goals for which PTA functions. Article 3, Section 1, lists our objectives with which you should all be familiar. Article 3, Purposes, Section 2, outlines how we will go about accomplishing the purposes. And Section 3 outlines the federal status under which our organization operates. Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Service Code. Article 4 describes the policies that set us apart as a 501c3 association. Please note in particular A, which states we must be non-commercial, non-sectarian, and non-partisan, and Section D, our commitment to inclusiveness and equity and a knowledge of PTA. Article 5, relationship with the national PTA and New York State PTA. Article 5 states the authority under which the PTA is chartered and covers all the rules that bind a local unit to New York State PTA and national PTA. This section is probably the most overlooked section in the bylaws, yet one of the most important to understand. Every unit chartered under New York State PTA is a constituent organization of New York State PTA and national PTA and must adhere to the requirements set forth by those organizations. While we are limited on time, I am going to review this article in detail because of its importance. Please note that Article 5 in council bylaws, while similar, has differences which we will review later. Section 1 describes the requirements to remain in good standing. These include submission of your first dues payment of at least 25 members by October 31st, your insurance premium paid to AIM by June 30th, your bylaws approved by New York State PTA within the last 3 years, filing of the 990 annually. Your tax exempt status cannot be revoked by the IRS, and officers' contact information must be updated annually by June 30th. When a unit does not maintain good standing, your charter is in jeopardy. Article 5, Section 2 and 3 prescribes the terms of the adoption of the unit bylaws. Section 4 and 5 prescribes the requirements of membership for officers and board members. To serve as an officer or board member, an individual must be a member of the PTA unit. Article 5, Section 6 prescribes the requirements related to the maintenance of financial records. This is a very important section, and you need to look at this carefully and understand that your records are to be open to New York State PTA at any time, and you must keep permanent books of accounts and records. Article 5, Section 7 prescribes the authority of New York State PTA to terminate the charter of a local PTA. And Section 8 prescribes the obligation of the local PTA upon termination of its charter. Article 5, Section 9 prescribes the responsibility of the local PTA to collect dues and the remittance of a portion to New York State PTA. Section 10 prescribes that only paid members may participate in the business of the unit. Section 11 prescribes the requirement to set and include in your bylaws a quorum. And Section 12 prescribes that members of the nominating committee must be elected, not chosen. Article 5, Section 13 requires that all bylaws include a provision that prohibits voting by proxy. A proxy vote is a ballot cast by one person on behalf of another person, not allowed in PTA. Section 14 prescribes that any item indicated with a hashtag must be included in local bylaws, as these are provisions that correspond with and are required by New York State PTA bylaws. And Section 15 prescribes that amendments made to bylaws at the state and national PTA levels that impact a local PTA bylaws are automatic amendments to the local PTA bylaws. No vote is required by the local PTA for these changes. Article 5, Section 16 describes the conditions and circumstances for dissolution of a local PTA other than dissolution due to the withdrawal of charter as described previously. The first situation would be if a school is being closed. Just because the school is closing does not mean the PTA is automatically dissolved. A dissolution meeting must still be held, and the region director must be notified and invited to the meeting. These are steps that are often overlooked by units in this circumstance. Article 5, Section 16B would cover pretty much any other reason that you would want to dissolve a unit. Article 5, numbers 1, 2, and 3 apply to either circumstance of dissolution. Number 1 prescribes the manner of notice required prior to the meeting. Number 2 prescribes who is entitled to vote at the dissolution meeting. It would be only those persons who were members of the association on the date of submission of the question of dissolution and who continue to be members on the date of the special meeting. Those are the only people that can vote on whether to dissolve the unit. And number 3 prescribes the requirements for approval of dissolution and requires a 2/3 vote. On to Article 6. Sections 1 through 4 prescribes eligibility for membership, your membership year, amount of state and national portion of dues, and the deadline to submit the dues to the state office. Membership, with all its privileges, is open to everyone. No person may be denied membership based on residency in the school district, having a child in the school, or not being a parent. Council bylaws differ in this article as well, since they have no individual members, but rather member units. Article 6, Section 5 prescribes the amount of dues to be charged per member. The amount of dues is the decision of the voting body of each unit. Each member's dues must be an amount at least equal to the total portion payable to National PTA and New York State PTA, which is currently $4. There are 4 types of memberships, and you can set a different amount for each if desired. Article 6, Members and Dues, Sections 6 through 10, continue with the details of membership and dues. Article 6, Section 11, prescribes the terms of an honorary life membership. Please note the highlighted section. An honorary life membership does not give an individual the rights and privileges of a voting member. It is an honorary award. Dues must still be paid by an individual to be entitled to participate in the business of an individual PTA. Article 7, Officers and their election. Article 7 prescribes the officers to be elected, when the election is to be held, election of the nominating committee, who may be nominated, the voting process, the term of office, and when the term begins. Anything in bold would be choices made by the unit when voting on their bylaws. Section 2A will prescribe the officers for your PTA. In order to be an active, viable PTA in good standing, you must have, at a minimum, a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. Section 2B through 2F prescribe the election month, the term of office, term limits, and conditions. Please note that in the council bylaws, this whole article is Article 8 and has differences specific to council. Article 7, Section 3 prescribes the makeup of your nominating committee. Please note the word elected. The nominating committee is always elected, not chosen. It also prescribes the charge of the committee, the ability of members of the committee to be nominated for a position, and the requirement of consent from the nominees. This section also goes on to prescribe the reporting requirements for the nominating committee and an optional Section F requiring prior notice to run from the floor. You may or may not have this in your bylaws. Article 7, Officers and their elections, Section 4 prescribes how vacancies are to be filled. Article 8, Duties of Officers. Due to the limited time, I will not review each of these individually. If you have any questions on interpreting any of these sections, contact your Region Bylaws Chair or Region Director for assistance. In the Council bylaws, this is Article 9. Article 9, Executive Committee. Article 9, Section 1 and 2 prescribes who is on the Executive Committee and the duties of the Executive Committee. This is Article 10 in the Council bylaws. Article 9, Sections 3 through 6 prescribes the details of meetings and special meetings of the Executive Committee and the required quorum. Note Section 4, which refers to when live in-person meetings cannot be held. Article 10, the Executive Board. Article 10, Sections 1 through 3 describe who is on the board and the eligibility to be a board member. Note each board member shall be a member of this PTA. Very important. This is Article 11 in your council bylaws. Article 10, Executive Board, Section 4, prescribes the duties of the board. Note that H may or may not be in your bylaws, depending on the options chosen by your unit. Article 10, Executive Board, Sections 5 through 8, prescribe the parameters for regular and special meetings of the board and the required quorum to conduct business. Article 11, meetings of the association, prescribes the number of meetings to be held, the month of the annual meeting, eligibility to vote, special meetings, and the required quorum to conduct business. This is Article 12 in council bylaws and has different criteria for a quorum in council bylaws. Article 12, sections 1 through 5, under committees, prescribes the creation of committees and special committees and the appointment, term, and responsibility of committee chairs. This is Article 13 in council bylaws and has one additional clause to be reviewed later. Article 12, sections 6 through 8 prescribe your required special committees and their reports. Please note for Section 8, an audit is required by regulations governing not-for-profit corporations in New York State, so you must have an audit committee. Section 9 prescribes the quorum for committee business, and Section 10 prescribes that the president is an ex officio member of all committees, with the exception of the nominating and audit committees. Ex officio means a member of a body who is part of it by virtue of holding another office. So by virtue of being president, your president is an automatic member of every committee and should be notified of all committee meetings. Article 13, council membership, prescribes the eligibility and election or selection of delegates, term of office, and duties. A unit that is a member of a council must adhere to council bylaws in assigning delegates. A unit may choose to have less than the number of delegates allowed per council bylaws, but never more. In choosing less delegates, understand that you are depriving your unit of an equal voice in the council. Be aware that the number of delegates specified in your bylaws is the maximum number of delegates your unit can have, even if the number in the council bylaws is more. Ideally, the unit and council bylaws should specify the same number. Article 14, fiscal year, prescribes your fiscal year. The fiscal year is the same as New York State, which is July 1st, New York State PTA's fiscal year, which is July 1st to June 30th. This is in accordance with IRS regulations and is the same in council bylaws. Article 15 outlines specific operational requirements under the local units charter with National PTA and New York State PTA and is the same in council bylaws. This again is a very important but much overlooked article in the bylaws of units and councils. Section 1 prescribes limitations on the distribution of earnings to individuals. Section 2 prescribes the exempt activity rules that must be followed under our IRS 501c3 exempt status. Section 3 prescribes the rules governing the political activity of your local PTA. And Section 4 prescribes and reiterates the surrender of assets upon dissolution of the local PTA unit. Article 16, parliamentary authority. This directs all issues not covered in the bylaws to Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. Council is the same. In Article 17, you will find the requirements for submitting bylaws for state approval and for amending bylaws. These are the same for council. A 2/3 vote is required to change the bylaws, and a 30-day notice is also required. So now I had promised we'd go over the differences between unit bylaws and council bylaws. So under Article 5, there are a number of differences. Section 5 in Article 5, Section 5 in council bylaws defines the purposes of the council, which are a little bit different than the unit. Section 6 prescribes council's relationship with the local PTAs. Please note that councils may not interfere with its local units on internal PTA matters or dictate to a local PTA. Additional sections of Article 5 that differ from unit bylaws is Section 16, the manner of dissolving a council. It references the notification and votes of member units as opposed to members in the unit bylaws. The type of vote is an instructed vote, and the president of New York State PTA must also be notified of the meeting to dissolve. Section 18B includes the requirement of a minimum of 3 member units in good standing for the council to be in good standing. So the unit status does matter. If it gets down to there are less than 3 member units that are in good standing, you're jeopardizing the council being dissolved. So it's very important to keep everybody's status in good standing. In council bylaws, Article 6, this prescribes member unit dues rather than individual member dues as in unit bylaws. Please note that only the dues specified in this portion of the bylaws are required of the member units. Any additional monies requested of the units must be voted upon by an instructed vote, and a majority of the units must vote in favor. However, dissenting units are not required to participate. Section 4 specifies that delegates from units whose dues are not paid may not participate in the business of the council. Again, this would only apply to the dues listed in the bylaws, not any other funds approved to be raised by council. Article 7, voting body. The voting body of the council differs from the unit, and Article 7 details who makes up the voting body, voting procedures, and additional requirements. This article is also where you will find how many delegates are allowed from each unit. As stated earlier, a unit may choose to have less than the number of delegates allowed per the council bylaws, but never more. Be aware that the number of delegates specified in council bylaws is the maximum number of delegates any unit can allow in their unit bylaws. Ideally, the unit and council bylaws should specify the same number. Article 8, Section 3A prescribes the makeup of the nominating committee, which is different from unit bylaws. Your individual council bylaws will reflect the option as approved by your council. It would be the 1 member elected from each member unit, or a number of members elected from a voting body of council. Under Article 12, Section 5, you will see that the quorum for a council is not a set number as in unit bylaws. It is determined based on how many are on your board and the number of member units. Article 13, Section 1 prescribes who is eligible to serve in any elected or appointed position. And that covers all the differences between the unit and council bylaws. I'd like to thank everybody for attending this workshop. I hope this helped you understand your bylaws better despite limited time. Please take the time to closely review your individual bylaws in depth. If you need further clarification or more information, please contact your region bylaws chair or your region director. The region bylaws chair are all a wealth of information, and they're ready to assist you with any bylaws questions. And I see I have about 5 minutes left. So if there's any questions and answers that were typed into the chat box, we'll try to answer some now. Thank you for attending.